but I called so much about that game, except for the fact that the offense struggled so much in the first half. We're going to talk about that. We're going to have a little bit of group therapy. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, or postcast, I should say.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we're going to do some group therapy tonight because we need to do some group therapy because honestly, that game was both simultaneously infuriating and embarrassing, but also it wasn't the end of the world. And I will explain what I saw. In the first half of that game, Ole Miss was frankly the better team. If you looked at their Pete Golding and everybody had a great game plan. Do not get beat by explosive. You had Suntarian and Ladarius spying Milroe. He was struggling. But when Alabama was struggling to move the football and score the football, and you were getting the ball back, we had 3 possessions, 3, that went incomplete pass, incomplete pass, incomplete pass off the field. That took about a combined 1 minute of time of possession. That led to the second half being what it was. That led to our offense not doing what we needed to do. And then when Jackson Dart got greedy, they got greedy with that deep shot. They were moving the ball. They were doing fine. They were going down the field into field goal range. They force a deep shot that gets picked off. Alabama takes that momentum. And this drive, that interception to the touchdown pass, something clicked in. And all of a sudden, those 4- and 5-star players started playing like 4- and 5-star players. I'm not talking about Jalen Milroe. He's still not a special quarterback. But the other players played a ton better. All of a sudden, there was so much juice in the Alabama secondary and the defensive line, and our offensive line had trouble blocking him. And all of this stuff that we were genuinely concerned about going in every time we play Alabama, all of a sudden that became a factor. But the first half, when Ole Miss did not take advantage of being the absolute clear better team, doing all that stuff and offensively laying an egg with that play calling was pretty atrocious in the first half. It just was. And them not running Quinshawn for a whole quarter, that was a problem. And you put it all on Jackson Dart's hands, and everything was going a little bit wrong. Now, props to Alabama. They needed to get right. They kind of got a little right tonight. In the second half, they had momentum. And everybody's going to talk about Lane Kiffin tweeting all week and all of that stuff and how that affected. Did he poke the bear? All of that stuff. No, that stuff would have happened in the first quarter, not the third quarter. If anything else, Ole Miss was going to always get Alabama's best because of Texas and USF. And this poking the bear or whatever may have caused that little bit of delay, and Ole Miss needed to answer and needed to score the ball in the first half. When it was 7-6 at halftime, even though we were clearly the better team in the first half, I knew that it was like, hey, we are one slip away from being behind. We are one penalty away from Alabama being in field goal position. And whenever that happened, it was just problematic. There was just nothing that could happen. If you want to look at the stats in the game, the Ole Miss's offense did not play well. Alabama's defense, like I said, 78 blue chip athletes on that Alabama football team. You do not want 4- and 5-star players playing like 4- and 5-star players. And in the second half, they did. But if you look at there, Jackson Dart ended up with 244 passing. There was too much of the offense was on Jackson's shoulders. And that's one problem that I think we're seeing with this offense. Okay. And not complaining about the offense. The offense can be plenty explosive at times. But they tend to pick one player to be the star for the game. And if that doesn't work, they don't have a plan B. And that's a lot of the stuff that Bill Flowers has talked about in our talks during the week and problems that he has with this offense. Well, yeah, you see a situation where it kind of got put in his hands. And if his first read wasn't open, and his first read sometimes is outside the numbers, and you have a tight end running wide open in the middle of the field, and there's no way to get to him because you don't have time to get to him, that is a problem. And like I said, Alabama's got the 4 and 5 star players, all these blue chip athletes. Ole Miss was not a probability favorite to win this. We'll go over this a little bit later, and we have gone over this. But Ole Miss only had 300 yards of offense. This offense is far too explosive for that. Zachary Franklin played the whole game. Trey Harris was trying to go in the red zone. Caden Prescorn played a bunch. We can assume that they will all three be back for LSU in full go. You look at the time of possession, 34 to 25 minutes. Alabama, like 350 yards of offense. Pete Golding actually did an admirable job this game. This was not on Pete Golding. This was a do what you can to slow them down while the offense just completely was inept. And this was, like I said, whenever you make $9 million a year, you kind of have to own this game. It just does. And everybody's going to talk about Charlie Weiss and the play calling. Charlie Weiss only called the plays that were okayed by Lane Kiffin during the week. It's one of those situations. You can't have a situation where when something bad goes offensively, it's Charlie Weiss's fault. When it's something good, it's Lane Kiffin's fault. Now, if you look at the run offense, Quinshawn did average 4.3 yards a carry, had 13 for 56, actually started to look a little bit more like Quinshawn Judkins. You look at the receiving, Jordan Watkins, 9 catches for 57. He was that short option, and honestly, he could have been used. Zachary Franklin did have the 1 catch. Caden Prescorn had a catch as well. Dayton Wade was the deep threat in this game. And if you look defensively, Ashanti Sistrunk, I just wanted to put this up because Sistrunk came on the show in the summer. John Saunders played a pretty game. Jared Ivey played a pretty good game, had 1 TFL. Suntarian Perkins, 2 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. This guy needs to be on the field more. They need to find a way to get him on the field more. Even if it's in simple packages, you need to figure out a way to get him on the field more. But that is exactly how it went. Ole Miss wasted a golden opportunity in the first half. At the end of the first half, Ole Miss was like, hey, everybody should feel good about what we're doing. But also, we kind of all knew that we were one slip away from this getting out of hand. And once the momentum hit, my God, once the momentum hit, whenever that touchdown was hitting, Suntarian was like that close to having his 3rd sack of the ball game. Jalen Milroe got it off, completed the touchdown pass, and whenever that happened, it was Katie bar the door. You had the targeting penalty. All kinds of juice entered that stadium. And whenever you have a team as talented as that one, the last thing you needed was momentum. That is why Ole Miss needed to take advantage of the first half, and they were just simply unable to do it. Now, like I said, the play calling in the first half was at best suspect. And there's really no nice way to say that. And that allowed basically 3 and outs, Alabama to get the ball. Now, Alabama's offense wasn't doing anything either, but they were able to use some time of possession, and that defense was just on the field for, heck, I would be willing to bet most of the first half. The missed field goal at the end of the first half, that was kind of a big play as well, 10-6. Would probably have been better off than 7-6. And, you know, with what's going on, it's just kind of a weird situation. And like I said, this is group therapy. And we're going to go to the chat room in a little bit and find out what you guys are saying. But it should be quite interesting what's going on. Let's see. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of people venting. I don't think this is a season ender, by the way, before we get started. I do not think this is a season ender, unless Lane allows it to be. I mean, you have LSU next week. LSU is not playing well right now. They're in danger of going down by 2 scores to Arkansas in the first quarter. They are not playing well. So there's a chance that both teams could have kind of a bounce back type game for them next week. So you have that game. This was a game that Ole Miss was not favored to win. Let me bring this up real quick. This is the ESPN FPI coming into this game. And I didn't put the score there because I didn't have time to update that slide. Alabama was a 66% chance of winning. They were 7-point favorites. Ole Miss is underdogs in 3 games this year, or 2 games this year. They are coin flip against LSU, but they were underdogs at Alabama, and they'll be underdogs at Georgia. So those will always be difficult because of the talent that is on the field. That doesn't change the fact that Ole Miss should have had a chance to win this game. That doesn't change the fact that Ole Miss was in a position going into kickoff more so better than they have been in recent memory. And we can be upset about that because Ole Miss did not play well offensively. They did not. They would tell you that. Lane would tell you that. Charlie Weiss would tell you that. Jackson Dart would tell you that. But it might have been worse if Ole Miss would have played better offensively and this still happened. The fact knowing that Ole Miss didn't play well, probably a little bit of a silver lining. Now, I did it like if Ole Miss would have won this game, what this game meant would have made the Ole Miss LSU game the biggest game in Oxford in 20 years. It's still going to be a big game. It still means an awful bunch. If Ole Miss wants to get to the NY6, if Ole Miss wants to get to the Citrus Bowl, that level, Ole Miss needs that game. It's still a ton to play for. But Lane puts a lot into this Alabama game. And since Lane puts a lot in this Alabama game, the team takes on the personality of the coach. It just does. So it's going to be on Lane to get them right for next week. And I think they will be right for next week. I think they will play well. I think they will be inspired. And Ole Miss has a chance to do all right. They are a probability favorite going into that football game. But it just is what it is. All right. Let's see. Let's look at the chat room. I'm just going in there. And this is it. That pick was horrible. It totally changed the momentum of the game. Could have come back until that decision. Yeah, they got greedy. After the I guess Alabama kicked the field goal to make it 9-7. And Ole Miss was driving down the field. And it was first down. And I think they were inside Alabama's 50-yard line. And they just decided to force up a shot and tried to force one. But whenever you do that, that can lead to massive momentum swings in that situation. Then Alabama got the ball back. Boom, boom, the big pass play, which was just a money pass play. And Jalen Railroad jumped up, pumping up the crowd. That game, that was the moment. That was the moment that the switch flipped to where 4- and 5-star players started playing like 4- and 5-star players. And yeah, it was a bad pass, and it was complete. The bad thing is it was completely unnecessary. I talked about a video I did at halftime that in the first half, Ole Miss was clearly the better team, and they didn't take opportunities. And my big thing was if Ole Miss goes out there and acts like they are clearly the better team, they had a chance to boat race this game. They did not. They overly deferred to Alabama. And once that happened, Alabama's 4- and 5-stars got good and lathered up, good and ready to go, and they just kind of took over the game. Not Jalen Milroe. The other players took over the game. Jace McClellan played quite well. The defensive line for Alabama actually really started winning in that second half of the ball game. And whenever that happened, the offensive line was in a whole lot of trouble because we saw against Tulane that it can be problematic against decent offensive lines. Therapy Crying says 100% on Kiffin spending his time trolling Bama defensive coordinator on social media. How's that look now? Hey, Therapy, I'm going to be in the minority on this. That was probably the difference in the Bama that we saw in the second half coming out in the first half and then having that slow start. It was a situation to where Bama was always going to play their best after Texas and USF. Ole Miss was always going to get that best shot because they are a prideful program. It was going to happen. What Lane Kiffin did was decide to try and agitate and annoy them that maybe they'd be a little bit slow coming out of the gate, and they were. If you look at it like that, it worked. The problem is offensively, they could not get going, and their play calling in the first half was fairly shambolic. I'm not one of these people that is going to blame Charlie Weiss and give Kiffin all the credit. I view the offense as a joint effort. Bo Wallace and Wonderlick are talking trash about Kiffin on Twitter. Any idea what that's about? Okay. Just as a guess, there is a weird rivalry developing between Freeze and Kiffin right now. And players that played for Freeze are going to take Freeze's point of view. Players that played for Kiffin is going to take Kiffin's point of view. And they're not going to like exactly what's going on. The offense, I talk about this offense all the time, that this offense is the equivalent of going down and running a pick and roll in the NBA. Okay. Now, different plays, like micro plays within a play to try and get a matchup that you can do. It's a one-on-one offense. What Freeze did, and honestly, Bill Flowers has a problem with it as well. What David Cutcliffe did was more of a total thing, to where your first read is here, your second read is here, and it's very much a progression. It's the equivalent of, like in basketball, Lane Kiffin runs like a pick and roll, and Freeze and Cutcliffe, they ran the motion offense. That's probably the difference in this situation. But yeah, there are going to be people having problems with this offense. And honestly, I have problems with this offense from time to time. Like I said, in the second quarter, it got out of hand a little bit. With this being such RPO centric, okay? With this being such RPO centric, the defense can force the offense to do what they want them to do. If that makes sense. If they know what your read is, they can make that play exactly what they want. And the choice all of a sudden becomes an RPO towards the offense as opposed to the defense. It's one of the problematic things that I see about this offense from time to time, but I do think they're going to get better. Trent Cornelius says, QB change? No, absolutely not. Jackson Dart is fine. Jackson Dart is good. I just don't think they need to put the whole offense on Jackson Dart. Not when you have the best running back in college football sitting back there that's getting healthy. Only got 13 carries today. But this offense today was 100% centric on Jackson Dart. And whenever that offensive line has struggled the way they did against Tulane and all that, whenever you're playing 4- and 5-star players, they're going to be difficult to handle. So, Sean Nissen says, opposing defense have learned to just stay in their lane regardless of eye candy. RPO game is no longer a mystery. We need some wrinkles, not that cute play crap. I kind of agree with that. I think we can. I think it's in the offense. This is at the core, a lot of the offense that Lane Kiffin ran at Tennessee, at USC, all the under center stuff. He just actioned it for shotgun. I just think that maybe they need to hold back on the RPOs. The defense is kind of getting a little bit predictable. Let's see. We literally slowed the offense down for Bama to tag along. Well, that was because they had to. They had to give the defense a rest because the play calling was simply shambolic. Tracy Ivy, that's Jared's mom, says, I just want to find the parking deck where the car is. We have to move the ball on offense. I'm done. On to LSU. Yes, everybody needs to go on to LSU. Ole Miss can play with LSU. I'm going to do a victory. Why Ole Miss wins video for LSU, just like I always do. I'm going to be the same way that I always am. I saw nothing that turned that mind. What I saw was a group of 4- and 5-star players play like a group of 4- and 5-star players. And because they don't have a quarterback, they were beatable. He made a play. I said I was worried about explosives and Jalen Milroy. He made them. Props to him. Props to Alabama. We'll see. They go on to Starkville. We go on to LSU. We'll see what happens. Well, after LSU, if they lose there's no reason not to change to Sanders for letting – if Ole Miss loses to LSU, they need to change to Walker Howard. If there's a quarterback change, it needs to be to Walker Howard. Playing Spencer Sanders and starting Spencer Sanders does not help your program. If any quarterback Ole Miss changes to after a loss to LSU or after a loss to Arkansas, if any quarterback causes a quarterback change. It needs to be Walker Howard. I mean, that's just truth. They in no world should Ole Miss bench Jackson Dart for Spencer Sanders. That doesn't help you. That doesn't help you. So I will fight on that hill. I will die on that hill a little bit. Lane didn't give the team a chance to win. Yeah, it's one of those situations, I think, where Lane wants this game so much. In 2001, he was too aggressive as far as the fourth down calls. Last year, they actually called a pretty good game, but in the middle, it got a little bit weird. Tonight, they completely went all pass in a situation where they didn't need to. Maybe they just didn't think they could block them, but they needed that threat of the run game to open up the rest of the offense. This offense, like I said, works best when it tortures linebackers, when they don't know where to go. They don't know if it's going to be the jet sweep or the inside zone or the counter play or the tight end behind you. All of that stuff makes this offense difficult to stop. Whenever you take away something, whenever you go slower, whenever you do something else, and it becomes predictable with what you're doing, this offense, honestly, there isn't enough plays where it's very good. You need all of that stuff for it to be good. So, all-time choke job. The game was right there in our hands. That first half, the end of the first half offensively, Ole Miss lost this game. Alabama did not win this game. Good players, all respect to them, but in the first half, Ole Miss should have put this Alabama team away. Block punt, missed field goal, shanked punt. The special teams in this game was atrocious. There's honestly no way that you can sugarcoat that. And then when you take away the fact that they voluntarily decided to play one-dimensional offensively against one of the better defenses and one of the better personnel-wise teams in the country defensive-wise, doesn't make much sense at all to me. It honestly does not make much sense at all to me. But like I said, I'm not going to get onto him. I'm not going to get onto him on this one because there's still a lot to play for. I realized that Lane wanted this and maybe he got into his own head, okay? If you looked at this game going in, the way Ole Miss played and the way Alabama played, over half the analysts out there called it the way I did. I mean, I wasn't alone. I wasn't on an island on this one. And this was against Alabama. That's the reason I said, if not now, when? But I will say this, okay? As the week went on Monday, I thought Ole Miss was going to win. On Tuesday, I thought they were going to win a little less. On Wednesday, I thought they were going to win a little less because the doubt came in of playing in Bryant-Denny and the ability to win the game with the elephant noises and the numbers on the helmet. There's a reason I pointed that out. And the keys of the game was limited explosive plays from Jalen Milroe. Don't get beat by the helmet. It looks like two of those three keys Ole Miss did, and they completely got dominated on the special team side of the ball. I thought Jackson could have played a pretty good game if he didn't have to be the focal point. Honestly, he was where he needed to be. It's like Jackson's been in a 7 or 8 doing stuff within the offense this season. And Lane decided, hey, let's just turn him loose against Alabama on the road. And Jackson played fairly well other than that force. Other than that force. Shane Robbins said LSU will figure it out by next Saturday. We are Ole Miss. Losing to Alabama, who is favored to win that game, and they were probability favorites to win that game. That is not a we are Ole Miss. Now, it was a choke. Ole Miss should have won that game. Ole Miss was in a position to win that game. They did not win that game, but that is not a we are Ole Miss. That is not a 4th and 25. That's a bad embarrassment. Graves Baker says play calling in O-line. Yeah. What happened? The play calling was so bad, got the defensive line to get comfortable because they could realize where the spot was going to be for Jackson Dart, where the ball was going to be, the launch point, and they were just able to tee off. And those 4- and 5-star players were going against our 3- and 4-star players. That's what happened. Bama beats you because they are superior on the defensive line against everybody they play, with the exception of maybe Georgia. That's how they beat you. Offensive line-wise, they're a mess. Offensive-wise, Ole Miss absolutely should have been all right against that team. And Ole Miss was all right for 30 minutes against that team. The opening half, the opening drive of the second half, where Alabama drove down and kicked the field goal to make it 9-7. The next drive, Ole Miss is driving down to try and take the lead back. They call a play. They get greedy, throw an interception. That leads to the amazing, miraculous play where Jalen Milroe hits an explosive, which 2 explosives happened in the second half, by the way. To Alabama, all of a sudden it's 17-7 and the game's over. At that point, the game is over. Just Bama was ripe for the taking. Ole Miss just did not do it. This was not a game that Alabama beat Ole Miss. This is a game where Ole Miss couldn't beat Alabama, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And we have more questions about, I think Sanders needs a quarter at LSU. No. If Jackson needs to come out for a quarter, it needs to be Walker Howard. Every snap that Spencer Sanders takes that's not an emergency situation is a wasted rep. Period. Because Sanders is gone after this year. He's done. So you need to plan accordingly. If you get to the point where this season is a wash, you need to develop at that point. Like I said, I will die on that hill. Any chance we still get on the college football playoff? Not likely. The playoff was always going to be a difficult thing for Ole Miss. They almost had to win all their ball games. But I figure Ole Miss, even prediction-wise, if Ole Miss gets LSU, and LSU has not looked good, by the way, in this game. They have not looked good. But you still have to go to Georgia, and that's going to be problematic. More than likely, this team's ceiling is a New Year's 6, and they are probably more likely going to end up in the Citrus or the former Outback Bowl. Still a good team. This is still a really good football team. They just kind of choked a little bit today. Offensively, they didn't do the things that Tennessee was able to do against them last year, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Steven, I was shocked at how well our defense stepped up. Our defense played phenomenal. Nobody should say a thing about Pete Golding. They were worn out at the end. That's the reason Alabama was able to run the football. But their plan at the beginning of the game did enough where Ole Miss, if they just were at the level of what their offense was, okay? If they were at that level, you win that game. That was a game you should have won. That was a game a championship team wins. Now, I'm not saying a good team or a great team or anything. That's a game that a championship level team wins. But Ole Miss just was unable to do that as well. Jake Mitchell says it's a season ender, dude. Lane will go into depression just like last year. No. Like last year after Alabama was the Auburn stuff. That was the cause at the end of the season. It wasn't the Alabama game. It was the Auburn stuff that caused it to get weird, because the Arkansas game the next week was the game where Cole Kubelik and Jordan Rogers and all that was openly talking about Jackson Dart and Quinshon Judkins transferring with Lane Kiffin to Auburn. So that I don't think that was a situation to where there's a chance that Alabama beats you twice from time to time. I don't think that happened that night. I think what happened that night was that Lane had one foot at Auburn, honestly. Ole Miss is playing $9 million a year to beat Mercer. Yeah, Ole Miss beat Georgia Tech too, honestly. Got the quarterback change. Ole Miss should have won this game. Yes, absolutely. I will absolutely die on this hill. Ole Miss should have won this game. Ole Miss in the first half was the better football team. Everybody that watched the game would know that. There was 3 series where Ole Miss went 3 and out with 3 incomplete passes, where the defense basically played the whole second quarter. That led to the defense getting worn out in the second half. That led to Alabama kind of being able to impose their will. It wasn't a situation where Tommy Reese was anything special. It wasn't a thing where Jalen Milroe made super plays, although he did make one really big throw. But it was a game that Ole Miss lost and not Alabama win. Maybe we'll put it, Ole Miss couldn't beat Alabama, not Alabama won the game. How about that? Jerry Marshall, Stephen, we need whoever is going to call the plays to use the run at the tackles, not inside them, and a short passing game over the middle and outside. Hey, Bill Flowers got you back there. But yes, that is absolutely true. I think this offense can get too static from time to time. And that is why everybody is getting upset about it. Cameron Hall says Perkins was fired. Yes, Sontarian Perkins is a dude. He needed to show up in the biggest game of his career and literally was a whisker away from having 3 sacks. Perkins is awesome, and he is going to be a man. And I'm telling you, as the season, if Ole Miss loses to LSU, which is possible, that's a coin flip game. I mean, Ole Miss is a 52% favorite. LSU is 48%, 52 to 48. LSU is probably going to come into that game as a 4 or 5% underdog or favorite. Although right now, if it looks this way, who knows what's going to happen. But if Ole Miss lost that game, and if Ole Miss lost, say, Texas A&M and Georgia, and they had 4 losses, you're going to see a lot of Perkins in it. You're going to see a lot of development and reps for next year, because I've said for 6 months, 2014 is unbelievably important for Ole Miss. Or 2024, not 2014. So Perkins needs to play a little bit. I think Ladarius Tennyson played pretty well. I think Corey Coleman played pretty well. I think the linebackers as a whole played pretty well, honestly. The problem was the safety position giving up explosive plays. Again, I mean, stop me if you've heard this before. JR17, our D was finally showing up, and our offense was back in Oxford. Yeah, the offense completely didn't show up. The offense basically deferred to the side of the helmet, the elephant noises, the fact that Nick Saban was on the other field. Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss allowed themselves to get cute in that game. And because of that, they kind of became predictable. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Zane DePoyster, the offense looks static. Thoughts? Yeah, it looked predictable. And it's because Alabama knew what Jackson's spot was going to be. Every pass was the same number of drops. There were no rollouts. The jet sweeps, they occasionally did them, but not many. They decided to try and get cute with Quinshawn early in the game. And whenever that happens, Jaheim Otis and those monsters can just go to that one area. And eventually, like Dallas Turner and those guys started to get home. And whenever that happened, it was kind of Katie bar the door. Zachary Franklin looked all right. Caden Prieskorn looked all right. You have to assume that they're going to be full go next week. You're going to have to assume that Trey Harris is going to be full go next week. And I mean, Trey Harris played in this game. Only a couple of red zone routes, but he played in this game. So whenever they're at full strength and whenever they're doing that, they need to make sure that they are calling the game to utilize all their weapons, because at times, this is going to sound weird. It's like Tecmo Bowl out there, to where the defense just has to get, okay, is this play to Dayton Wade? And they just guess that. And if they do that, it's locked up and there's no second option. So we need to see what happens. And when Caden Prieskorn dropped that second down pass, all of a sudden Jackson Dart quit throwing the ball to him. Very bizarre. Very bizarre the way they call that. And Luke, we had guys open. We did. There were certain plays where things were cut down, but there were plays that were covered on the outside where the ball got thrown that way that Caden Prieskorn had nobody within 10 yards of him. And it's because they're all 4 and 5 star players, but it's also because as a scheme, and like I said, it's that pick and roll type stuff. It's not progression based reads, which means it's boom or bust, essentially. It's Tecmo Bowl type football. And you had an Alabama defense that was going up against this offense, and those guys were juiced. Those guys were absolutely juiced. And whenever you have that, I mean, it's never going to be difficult. And everybody's going to talk about Kiffin poking in the bear. And it's like, no, USF and Texas poked the bear. Not Ole Miss, not Lane Kiffin in that situation. Luke Shaw says we must have gotten pressure and caused Dart to miss some open guys too. Yes, but a lot of it has to do with that. Zane DePoyster says, why can't we get Judkins loose? Judkins averaged 4.5 yards a carry against Alabama today. Judkins wasn't the problem. He just didn't get used for whatever reason. O-line is, I think the O-line might be a little big, honestly. I think Micah Pettis is a good football player. I think he's a little big to be an offensive lineman in this system. And going against ends like that, that's going to be a problem. Jason R17 said Dart had time though. Yes, he did. And Quinshawn needs 20 plus carries every game. Maybe. He definitely needed one in the second quarter, but kind of is what it is. Okay. This is not, I intentionally waited until now not to bring this up. Okay. That game was called slanted. And I'm not saying Ole Miss lost that game because it was called, but there were 2 or 3 targeting calls that were missed. There was one that was called. There was holding on like 2 or 3 explosive plays that Alabama had. It is absolutely nuts. Yes, I do think Dart is NFL draft bound. Yeah, I think Dart's an unbelievably toolsy player. And if Anthony Richardson can go 5th in the NFL draft, Jackson Dart can go fairly high as well. I do think Jackson Dart will do quite well in the draft. Refs missed a face mask and a pass interference and a whole, yeah, it was a weird situation game. And honestly, if Jackson Dart stays another year, that is probably bad for the quarterback room as a whole, because that probably means Austin Simmons is going to go do something else. I think Walker Howard's going to stick around. But Jackson Dart's going to do fine in 2024. He would be a fine option at quarterback for Ole Miss. Walker Howard would be a fine option at quarterback for Ole Miss. It's going to be fine either way. Now, I am happy that Ole Miss doesn't play Alabama next year, because Alabama's just in Lane's head. Alabama's in his head. Let's see. Cash the Real saying, the only way I see us winning the SEC is LSU loses to Ole Miss and Arkansas. Bama loses to Tennessee, A&M, and LSU. And then when we lose to Georgia, but win everything else. And it's possible. I mean, it's possible. But Alabama now has to drop a game somewhere. And the fact is, if they do drop a game somewhere, if they're in the West, you're going to have to go through that team as well. Alabama is absolutely in Ole Miss's head, more so than any other team on the schedule. Shane Robinson, 56 yards on 29 carries. A lot of that was sacks, honestly. A lot of that was sacks, and you're just grinding. Running the ball in Alabama is going to be difficult. I mean, they haven't changed that much from when Kirby was running things. Running the ball on them is going to be difficult. But that doesn't mean you quit doing it. I mean, that is the one thing that just drives me absolutely nuts, that you just quit doing it. Again, therapy. There's no such thing as poking the bear. The game was going to go the way it went. regardless, what Lane did probably meant that it waited until the second half instead of in the first half. Whenever they lost to Texas at home and they looked absolutely putrid against USF, this was always going to be a difficult task, and it just doesn't matter what Lane did, period. Just doesn't. Honestly, can we be surprised that we thought the last 3 years we had him and Lane as much as I love him, fall short at every time? I think Lane is just in Lane's head. He just is. Like I said, thank God Ole Miss doesn't play Alabama next year. Thank God. Lane's beaten every other team that he's played in the SEC. Well, with the exception of like Georgia, because this will be the first year they've played Georgia. But except Alabama, because this game is in his head so much. This is a game in the first half that an offense ready to go with a good game plan that wasn't being cute wins this game and boat races it. This game could have easily been a 35-10 win for Ole Miss. I'm dead serious about that. This game could have easily have been a 35-10 win for Ole Miss. But the first half, Ole Miss just dropped the ball. And when you went into the halftime at 7-6, I was like, hey, we should feel good because we're beating Alabama at halftime, but we are one slip away from being behind in this game. And once Alabama woke up and the momentum happened, it was terrible. The play calling was awful, and I am not going to argue that, but I also am not going to say that every time something goes wrong, we need to blame it on Charlie Weiss, and every time something goes good, we should give Lane all the credit. The offensive unit, they both deserve blame. This is Lane's offense. Charlie Weiss is his right-hand man that he brought in to call the offense so that he would call exactly what he wanted. This isn't a situation where Charlie Weiss has autonomy. So, and besides, Lane had a clipboard, had the play sheet, and had a headset. We don't know how many plays Lane called in that game. So, Hunter says, roll damn Tide. Hey, good for you, man. I'm glad you could get going as well. 4 and 5 star players, 78 blue chip players. Honestly, it shouldn't have been that close. How much are we missing Jeff Lebby tonight? Willis says, I think a good bit, honestly. And honestly, not because of Charlie Weiss Jr. It's because Jeff Lebby would be able to tell Lane Kiffin, no, we need to do this. I think that's the problem more than Charlie Weiss, whose attitude is we're going to do whatever coach says. Jeff Lebby is stubborn enough to kind of do his own thing. We couldn't get separation all game from the wide receivers. That's because, honestly, they didn't run a lot of crossers, honestly. There not a lot of man beaters. There was a lot of stuff that they did their own way, and that was problematic. Hunter says, I'm mainly fine locked on Bama, but I like this dude too. Thank you, Hunter. Hey, I said all week, and if anybody listened to my show, and I'm as homer as it gets for Ole Miss football, I understand that. But I said all week, if Alabama's 4 and 5 star players play like 4 and 5 star players, it was going to be a tough task for Ole Miss. And I was worried about Jalen Milroe and explosive plays, and that came back and bit us as well. So just kind of is. Sooner or later, they had to put the ball down and let them play. The better team showed it was. Yep. 78 blue chip players, 4 and 5 star players. Alabama has 78 of them. Ole Miss has 23. It's not hard. It's the Jimmies and the Joes. Whenever you have an opportunity to beat Alabama, you beat Alabama. You can't. If you give them a chance to stay in the game, they will end you. And Dead Soxy, we should have won this damn game. Exactly. Jason, you are exactly right there. We should have won this game. It was a game that in the first half, we let it get away. We let it get away. The advantage that we had and the way that we could take them down, that went away. And whenever that went away, all of a sudden, those 4 and 5 star players that Alabama have, they started playing like 4 and 5 star players. And even then, they were in the red zone with 5 minutes to go, down by 2 scores. They could have cut it to 1 score game. They weren't making plays. Period. This guy is Mr. Excuses all week. I listened and he sounded like he was speaking a different dialect. I don't know what that means. But yeah, I'm going to do it again for LSU. So don't expect me to change, honestly. Let's see. Carrie is not happy right now. Rachel Nichols' husband, we dominated the first half and we were only up once. Yep, that was the ball game right there. Bengals say Perkins' potential SEC Freshman of the Year case looked very promising. Yes. Every game that Suntarian Perkins plays, he is the best player on the field. I'm convinced of it. Every game that he plays, he's the best player on the field, period. And this happened against Alabama. Yes, he needs to play. Seriously. Let's see what else we have in the chat. If our kicker doesn't miss that one kick, it could have changed the whole vibe for the second half. Yeah, that was a big kick. If you were up 10-6 on Alabama and they go down and score a touchdown to make it 10-9, maybe they don't call that crazy shot play that gets picked off and they end up scoring the touchdown, because that, the last 4 minutes of a half and the first 4 minutes of a half, those middle 8 minutes are so important in football. And we go down and we miss the field goal. Alabama goes down and kicks the field goal, gets the interception, and scores the touchdown that early, like 9 minutes to go in the third quarter. Ole Miss is down 17-7. Nick Saban absolutely schooled Lane Kiffin in the middle 8. Seriously. Absolutely schooled him. The way LSU looks right now, I expect Saturday will be a hell of a game. Yeah, I think it will be too. I'm not anticipating such a hangover. The offense looking bad is something that's going to piss Lane off more than the defense looking bad. So, yeah, I think he'll be all right. If Lane can't do it with this group of players, then he can't do it. Jason, do what? Now, losing a football, the best teams lose football games. If we remember 2014 and 2015, those Bama teams, those national championship teams lost to Ole Miss. You can lose a football game. Now we need to see how they bounce back, because that's going to be the story. Is it going to be all about Nick Saban and playing Alabama, and then you let LSU and Arkansas get you? Because that's the question. And if Ole Miss lets LSU and Arkansas get you, I am going to be in my feelings on these shows the rest of the year. Everybody needs to be ready for that. Everybody's going to say, somebody pointed out, just because I said offensively, Lane Kiffin takes the blame today. Everybody's like, hey, heck of a heel turn by Stephen Willis. No, it's just the truth. Becky, my wife, is in the chat talking with Jason from Dead Soxy. So yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool indeed. Normally I only do 30 minutes for this. So understand that I'm kind of taking the lip. We're doing the group therapy situation right now. Okay. We are. Let's see. Can we have to be realistic about the talent standard of Ole Miss? What is the ceiling for the next 5 years? Is it a possible championship or just SEC runner-up? I think the playoff is the ceiling for Ole Miss, but not the 14 playoff, the 12-team playoff. I don't know if winning the SEC has ever been a ceiling type thing at Ole Miss. because the resources at Ole Miss are not where it is at these other schools. So winning a conference title is going to be more difficult than winning that playoff. That's the reason I am talking about that 12-team playoff. Ole Miss can be good enough to make that 12-team playoff to where they're playing Oregon and Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, and it's the biggest game in the history of the university. And once you get in the tournament, anything can happen. But over the course of a season, it's going to be a tall task. And now that we're going to, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, and Georgia being what they are, and Alabama is always going to be, it's going to be difficult to win the SEC. More difficult to win the SEC than to get to that 12-team playoff, if that makes sense at all. I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Hey, Brian Connor is like, hey, let's go over and talk noise. That's really cool. Hey, you beat a team that you were favored to beat and you were probability predicted to win, and you were just happy to win the game. You were absolutely elated that you were able to win this game because you had doubts going into it. But congratulations coming over and talking noise. But I appreciate the view, buddy. So, like I said, we're on our feelings right now. Willis says there's going to be so much controversy about the number 12 to 15 rankings every year. If you thought 4 was bad, yeah, it's going to be absolutely a mess. And now with all the parity that NIL and the transfer portal is creating, it's going to be a less dominant college football than we're used to. That is the reason I said that it would be great for Ole Miss to have that with the NIL and the transfer portal, is because parity helps Ole Miss. It just does. Jake, I realize you're in your feelings, buddy, but Ole Miss played for the SEC West in 2003, and they were 7-1 in the league that year. So let's calm down, buddy. Thoughts about the defense being on the field all day? It's honestly, it is what it is. They need to call the game in a way that helps the defense out a little bit. The defense is pretty good. The defense is doing what they're supposed to do. You need to help them out. They can't be on the field 35 to 40 minutes a game. You can't have Tennessee of, what year was that? 2021, the year that Matt went up there and won? That team is going to be difficult that Tennessee team won 7 games or 8 games. That might be the ceiling of doing that. Bama fans need to understand that Bama and Ole Miss have 2 completely different standards. Ole Miss is ecstatic about a 10-win season, and Bama's standards the playoff and are spoiled. Yeah, exactly. The difference is, if Ole Miss would have won this game, it would have set up the biggest game in Ole Miss's history in Oxford the next week. If Alabama won this game, it just sets up another game. It's just another season. They have to win the game. They've lost to Texas. They've looked bad against USF. You have the same level of panic that you had going into the next game. If Ole Miss wins that game, we're talking craziness. That's the difference between Ole Miss and Alabama. We played right into Alabama's hands with our game plan. Texas murdered them in the middle of the field. I've talked about that with Bill Flowers over and over again. I'm beginning to think that Lane Kiffin just doesn't like the middle of the field. But yeah, this is a situation that is on Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr., the whole offensive unit. So, all right. I think we're going to stop this. I hope everybody had a good night other than the game. I guess that was stupid of me to say. But I hope this group therapy session kind of worked everybody out. It was a good game. I enjoy Alabama. I enjoy talking to Luke. All those guys are very confident Alabama was favored to win the game. But honestly, and I still believe this, Ole Miss needed to win this game to be what they want it to be. They didn't win this game. So we are stuck at being the same as a good Ole Miss can be. So we're in the New Year's Six and Citrus Bowl, that realm. That is the realm that we have to play in. And a lot of that is going to come down to how we play against LSU next week. Because if Ole Miss can win those games, they'll probably be pretty all right, honestly. Jake says, love you, Steve, but I'm not in my feels. It's very objective. You keep talking about if. I'm talking about realities. It's time for $9 million a year to bring the Rebels to a higher level. The point is, Jake, it takes time. Do you remember where we were in 2020? They were 4-5 and playing Indiana in the Outback Bowl. 2021, they went to the Sugar Bowl. Yeah, sure. Last year, they took a step back. If you remember what Clemson did, and God, I can't stand Dabo, okay? I cannot stand Dabo. But if you remember Clemson's ascent, it was winning 10 games, then 8 games, and then 10 games, and then 8 games, and all of a sudden they got a quarterback in talent. They started recruiting to it, and they broke through. That's Ole Miss's path. There's not ways that you can skip steps, and we're in a much more difficult conference than the Clemson Tigers were. Now, if you talk about whether or not Lane Kiffin deserves $9 million, but on a play calling performance today, I don't see it. I agree with you. But going off one game and saying that he can't get you where they need to get it, that's not right. There's no way you can go in there. Luke Robinson's a good dude. I don't know Jimmy Stein, but Luke Robinson's a good dude. Bama fan says, honestly, I was worried at halftime. Yes, you should have been worried at halftime. The first half, Ole Miss looked like the better team. But you have the GOAT for a reason. You have 4- and 5-star players for a reason. And it's just one of those things. So we're going to shut it down today. We went an hour tonight. So that's pretty fantastic. So that's not bad for a postcast. It'll be up on the YouTube site. It'll be up on, I'll put the audio version up as well. And, should be fun. Should be good. We got LSU next week. Huge game. Absolutely massive game. I'm going to get Caroline Fenton. I'm going to talk to Dalen, who was at the game. He's probably going to vent a little bit. I'm going to talk to Bill Flowers. I'm going to talk to Pratt. I'm going to talk to Tom, all of those guys. I'm probably also going to try and get like David Eckert or somebody like that to be on the show as well next week. So tune in for that. For our What We Learned episode on Monday should be pretty good. And thanks to everybody that listened this week. And honestly, don't expect it to change. It's in the name. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Hope everybody has a good time the rest of the evening. Enjoy the football. We'll talk to you later.